Hey guys, welcome to the fifth part in this Python tutorial series on the Django web framework for Python, and in this one we're going to be talking about static files. So static files are just either JavaScript, CSS files or images or something like that, so the assets that aren't really HTML or your Python code. So to do that we're just going to get straight in and start including a basic CSS file into our Django project. So we're going to work with this same bootstrap document that we had before, and I'm just going to run the server just to make sure that still works, and so that's up and running. So now to add a static file, what I'm going to want to do is create a similar structure to the templates, because Django has a very clever static files management system, which if you go to your settings.py you can see it's an installed app called django.contrib.static-files. That's installed by default, but you're going to want to make sure that you do have it if you've, for whatever reason changed it or taken it out or anything like that. And there's also a static URL here which is defined by default, so you don't have to change any of the settings, although it does give you this useful link to the documentation which is going to walk you through the basics, much like this video. So let's create that structure that I've just mentioned. So in my accounts app, which is where I want to put these static files, I want a CSS file just to be able to style the page that we have at the moment, and so I'm going to create a new folder structure, and I'm going to say static, which is defined here in the settings, and I'm going to say accounts. So the reason behind accounts is the same for where we have accounts within the templates, so that if it collects all those files together, all the static files into one place on the production server, it's not going to get confused and not really know which one, so it's very explicit. So I'm going to create that, and now we've got static accounts. I'm just going to create a file called style.css. And I'm going to add some simple CSS here. So if you haven't seen CSS before, this is what it looks like. I'm just going to add a simple background color to just make it really obvious when the CSS is being applied. I'll just say blue. So it's going to give a fairly dark, bright dark sort of blue background, much like that is showing there. So let's see if that applies or not. So right now that doesn't work, and we're not getting any errors, and in fact we can even bring up the Chrome developer tools, and if you click on network and refresh you can see the files that are being loaded here, and it's only the main HTML file and it's the bootstrap CSS file, so it's not our current CSS file, and that's really just because we haven't added it in our HTML file. So in the head I'm going to say another link, much like we've got this bootstrap CSS here. I'm going to say we don't need these. I am going to say it's a CSS file, so I'm going to say type is equal to text /CSS, and I'm going to say this is going to be, so the link is the bit which is going to be dynamic. So unlike what you're probably used to if you've done any HTML before with assets like CSS, is we're not going to hard code the link in there. Instead we're going to use what's called the Ginger 2 templating language, which is a way of passing data through from Django to our HTML templates. And there's one called static, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. And we're going to talk more about the templating language called Ginger in the next couple of videos, because it's going to be used quite extensively throughout our project as we get to be able to show more of the data from our Django project into our templates and present that information. So for now I'm just going to say static, and I'm going to say, so this is going to be the relative path, so it's accounts /style.css. So I'll just fill that in. So it's accounts /style.css, and that should work except for the fact that we haven't loaded this static yet. So what I need to say is, with the curly brackets again, I'm going to say load static. Now, if you're using an earlier version of Django, it's recently changed from static files to static. So if you're using 1.9 or 1.8, you're going to want to say load static files, and that's still going to work in Django 1.10, but I'm going to say static because that's what it's changed to recently, so that's the new best practice. So now you can see, other than this Jumbotron thing, which is overridden by Bootstrap and set the background to grey, the rest of the document has been set to this horrible bright blue background, and that means our CSS is connected to our Django project. This is a really good way of doing the links because it allows you to make the links more dynamic, so that if you ever want to change where your static files are located in the future, then you can change that directory and only have to change it once, rather than in every single HTML file. And even though that might not matter in this project, because we've only currently got one HTML file and one CSS file, if you can imagine if you're working with 10 Django apps, all of which have 100 different HTML templates, which isn't really unrealistic in a larger project, then you can imagine how it'd be a huge waste of time to have to go through and manually change all those links to the CSS one by one. It's a huge waste of time and resources. So that's a little bit on the static files within Django and how you can use that to be able to create those dynamic links. In the next one we're going to be talking about the Ginger templating language.